Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something a little vulnerable today. Have you ever found yourself lost in thought again, wondering why a certain someone keeps showing up in your mind like a familiar ghost? Maybe it's been weeks, months, even years. You try to move on, you go about your day, but then suddenly there they are, like a whisper in your heart, like the warmth of a memory you can't quite let go of. You see a song, a scent, a street corner, and their name begins to pulse in your mind again. And you ask yourself, do they feel it too? Do they think about me the way I think about them? What if I told you that the thoughts you keep circling around might not be just yours alone? That maybe, just maybe, the person you can't shake is also caught in that same emotional loop, wondering, aching, remembering. You're not going crazy. You're not weak. You're not alone. In today's video, we're going to explore why someone lives in your thoughts long after they've left your life, and whether that silent connection means they're thinking about you too. We'll talk about emotional imprints, the psychology of longing, unfinished narratives, and yes, even the subtle signs that you're not the only one feeling this pull. So settle in, because this isn't just about them, it's about you, and what your mind is really trying to tell you. Have you ever laid in bed at night and really tried, not to think about someone, only to find them showing up anyway, not with a knock or a text, but in the back door of your consciousness, slipping into your memories like smoke under a closed door? And no matter how tightly you try to seal it, they find their way in. It's the quiet moments that make it hardest, isn't it? When you're brushing your teeth, driving home with the window slightly cracked, pouring your second cup of coffee, that's when they return. Not with answers or apologies or grand declarations, but with questions, quiet questions, emotional echoes, a flicker of their smile, the way they once looked at you like you were the only person in the room. And it stings because they're not in the room anymore, but they're in your head. And you wonder why do they still live there? And more hauntingly, do I live in theirs? The truth is love. Real love, deep desire, raw connection. It doesn't leave quietly. We like to think that we can end a relationship and tie it off with a little bow. We assume that time is linear and that healing is structured. But the human heart is not a filing cabinet. You can't just put them in a folder labeled past and expect your brain to comply. What often happens, especially for those of us over 30, is that we begin to understand how layered attraction really is. When you were younger, maybe you thought that chemistry meant you were meant for each other. But now, you realize that some of the most powerful connections are also the most unresolved, because it's not just them that you miss, it's the version of yourself that existed with them. And that's where it starts. The obsession, the mental loop, that replay of the last conversation, or the moment they pulled away. You begin to look for meaning in small things. The dream you had, the post they liked, the lyric you heard. You wonder, is the universe sending me a sign? Is this synchronicity, or is this just grief in disguise? Let's be honest here. Sometimes we hold on to people not because they're right for us, but because they made us feel something we haven't felt in a long time. Desire, aliveness, recognition. And when that disappears, it creates a kind of vacuum, a gap between what was and what still aches. That's where your thoughts live now, in that space where clarity should be, but isn't. You begin to interpret their silence. Is it deliberate? Are they doing the same thing, thinking about me, but saying nothing? You imagine them scrolling through old pictures, wondering, regretting. Maybe they'll reach out. Maybe they're just waiting for the right moment. Or maybe they've forgotten, moved on. And that's the torment, isn't it? The not knowing. You see, the brain hates open loops. When there's no closure, it creates fantasy to fill the gaps. It keeps you mentally entangled, not just with them, but with a version of events that may never be resolved. But here's the question I want you to sit with. Are they really on your mind? Or is it your need for resolution that's haunting you? Because sometimes it's not the person that we miss, it's the unfinished story, the apology we never got, the answer we never received, the love that felt almost enough. And yet, even when you understand that, even when you tell yourself it's over, it doesn't matter anymore, they still return. You still feel them in your body. And that is not your weakness. That is not foolishness. That is memory. That is attachment. Human relationships imprint on us emotionally. Think of them like tattoos. Some are faint, some are bold, some you forget until you catch a glimpse in the mirror. But they're there, a part of your psychological skin, especially the ones that burn the brightest. So let me tell you something you might not hear enough. Thinking about them doesn't mean you're stuck. It doesn't mean you're failing to move on. It means your heart is processing something that mattered deeply. And perhaps they are thinking about you too. You'll never fully know. That's the paradox of connection. We can be profoundly impacted by someone who's long gone, and we can also live rent-free in the minds of those we no longer speak to. Energy is shared, especially in emotionally intense relationships. The emotional residue of love, loss, attraction, it lingers like perfume on clothing. And sometimes when your thoughts drift back to them without reason, it's because some part of your psyche still believes there is something left unsaid. But here's where we need to be very careful. Just because someone is in your thoughts does not mean they are meant to be in your life. The presence of someone in your mind is not proof of destiny. It's proof of impact. Now, some people will say, if they haven't called you, they're not thinking of you. But the truth is more complex than that. People can think of you every single day and still never reach out. Because they're afraid, because they're ashamed, because they've convinced themselves you're better off without them. Because ego is louder than longing. And just like you hesitate to contact them out of fear of looking desperate, they hesitate too. Silence is not always indifference. Sometimes silence is emotional paralysis. And that brings us to something essential. If they are thinking about you, but doing nothing about it, then the work, the healing, the peace, it's yours to claim. No one can walk into your mind and evict them for you. No one can reach into your heart and stitch the wound closed. That work begins with self-inquiry. What do they represent to you? What part of you is still trying to resolve something through them? Because the moment you begin to answer those questions, that's when the thoughts begin to loosen. That's when your mind makes space for you again. And if they are out there thinking of you too, let that be what it is. A silent connection, a moment of parallel thought across the distance. But you don't need their thoughts to validate yours. You don't need their longing to prove yours is real. Your emotions are not waiting for their permission to exist. Let that be enough for now. There's something deeply human about trying to find meaning in the quiet spaces of our lives. When a person lingers in your mind, especially late at night or in moments of solitude, it doesn't always mean you want them back. Often, it means you're still trying to understand what their presence meant to you and what their absence continues to do. You see, emotional attachment is not always about romance. Sometimes it's about identity. Who you were when they loved you, who you were when they left, and who you are now, trying to rebuild the story without them. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, what role did they play in your life that made them so unforgettable? Maybe they were your mirror, the first person who really saw you. Maybe they touched a version of your emotional self that you didn't even know existed. And now, every time they pop up in your thoughts, it's not just them you're remembering. It's that part of you that came alive in their presence. That's the secret we don't often admit. We don't always miss the person. We miss how we felt around them, how being desired by them made us feel worthy, how being chosen made us feel safe, how being wanted gave us permission to want ourselves. And when that ends, when the messages stop, the rhythm dies, the routine breaks, your brain scrambles for continuity, for closure, for coherence, because it doesn't make sense that something so vivid could just evaporate. So your mind brings them back, not because you're weak, but because your nervous system is trying to resolve an emotional emergency. We often expect our hearts to obey logic, but hearts do not operate on spreadsheets. They move in circles, they repeat, they age. They remember with no calendar. That's why you find yourself revisiting that conversation, replaying that moment, wondering if maybe, if you just said one different thing, they would have stayed. If you'd loved a little softer, or a little harder, if you'd only known then what you know now. But the truth is, if they were meant to stay, they would have. And if they are meant to return, they will. Not because you manifested them, not because you held on to them long enough, but because people who are truly meant for you don't require mental gymnastics to stay. Still, it's hard to let go when your mind keeps suggesting otherwise. When the memory of their hand on your back, or the way they laughed when they let their guard down, feels more real than your present moment. And you ask yourself, am I still in their thoughts too? Do they remember that night, that feeling, that version of us? Let me tell you something tender and true. Yes, it is entirely possible that they do, but not always for the reasons you think. People think of others not just out of love, but out of guilt, out of curiosity, out of loneliness, out of nostalgia. Sometimes they remember you on a rainy afternoon and feel a pang of remorse, but still choose not to reach out, not because you didn't matter, but because they don't know how to matter to you now. Other times, they remember you in the middle of a happy moment, and their heart softens, not because they want to get back together, but because a piece of their joy will always carry your name. And then there are the moments when they do want to return, when they pick up the phone, draft a message, stare at your contact, but fear pulls them back. You're not the only one who wonders, what if I'm forgotten? They're asking themselves, what if I'm not welcome? This emotional loop can last for years, and often does. The pain you feel is not because you're still obsessed. It's because you haven't yet made peace with the ending. And endings that don't feel clean, they haunt us. But here's what you must understand. No amount of thinking about them will give you the closure you crave if that closure depends on their response. You don't need their clarity to find your calm. Sometimes, the reason someone is always on your mind is because they symbolize something unfinished. Unfinished love, unfinished dreams, unfinished healing. And until you meet that part of yourself with compassion, they will continue to visit you, not just in thought, but in your patterns, in the way you love new people, in the way you push them away or pull them too close. That is why you must ask, not why are they on my mind, but what are they trying to teach me? Because when someone occupies emotional real estate in your mind, they are serving a purpose. Maybe it's a lesson, maybe it's a mirror, maybe it's a reminder of what you need more of, or what you need to never accept again. The person might have been real, yes, but they also might now be a symbol of what you lost, of what you crave, of what you still need to forgive yourself for. Let's take a breath here, because this is tender. Some people live in our minds long after they've exited our lives, not because we want them back, but because we never felt safe enough to grieve the way they left. So that grief gets stored as thought, as wandering, as replays, as longing masked as fantasy. And we imagine they might be thinking of us too, because that fantasy feels safer than admitting we're grieving alone. But you're not alone. You're human. You're processing. You're remembering. And sometimes you're healing in silence. That doesn't make your pain less valid. It makes your strength more beautiful. Now, here's something practical. If someone is constantly on your mind, one of the most effective things you can do isn't to force them out, but to invite them in. On purpose. Sit down, light a candle, close your eyes, and allow yourself to think of them. Feel what needs to be felt. Cry if you need to. Laugh if that comes. Write them a letter that you never intend to send. Say the things you never got to say. Ask the questions they'll never answer. And when you're done, fold the paper and place it somewhere safe, or burn it. This is a ritual, a sacred act of reclaiming your peace, of transforming obsession into intention. Because the more you try to push the thought away, the louder it becomes. But when you face it head on with grace, something miraculous begins to happen. The thought loses its grip. The story starts to shift. And you begin to remember that while you cannot control who visits your mind, you can choose how long they stay. Some people are meant to be chapters, not conclusions. Lessons, not destinations. And your mind, beautiful and complex as it is, sometimes confuses the two. So next time they show up in your thoughts, don't panic. Don't judge yourself. Don't go spiraling into, does this mean they love me too? Instead, breathe and ask, what is this thought trying to tell me about me? Because in the end, this isn't really about them. It's about your healing. It's about your truth. It's about the part of you that's finally ready to be seen. Not by them, but by you. Sometimes we underestimate how long the emotional body takes to heal. Not the mind. The mind can rationalize. It creates stories, it moves forward, but the emotional body, it lingers, it moves slowly, it craves touch, connection, rhythm, meaning. And when a relationship ends, especially one that stirred something profound in us, it doesn't just vanish from that body, it gets stored in subtle ways, in the breath, in the skin, in the pauses between thoughts. And so when you find yourself thinking of them again, not with logic, but with sensation, it's your body remembering, longing not necessarily for them, but for what you felt. And this is important. Because if we don't separate the person from the feeling, we begin to believe they are the only path to that emotion again. And that's when we start waiting, obsessing, hoping. But the truth is, what you miss might not be them. It might be the way their presence gave you permission to feel alive, seen, desired, heard. And those feelings, they are yours. They are not bound to them. They were only awakened by them. Think of them like a match. They struck the flame, yes, but the fire is yours, and you can light it again without needing their hands. But first, we have to understand why our thoughts return to them so often. Why do we mentally revisit the people who have left us, especially those we had no closure with? Why is the mind obsessed with returning to emotional puzzles that may never be solved? It's because your nervous system craves resolution. Your emotional brain is designed to complete stories. When something ends abruptly, when there's betrayal, confusion, or simply silence, your psyche doesn't know where to place the memory, so it keeps revisiting it again and again, hoping that this time the pieces will finally click. And here's the part we often don't say aloud sometimes. We would rather suffer through the repetition than face the grief of letting go entirely. Because to truly release someone from your mental space, it means admitting they are not coming back, that the fantasy will not become reality, that the questions may never be answered. And grief, for many of us, feels heavier than longing. But you cannot build your future on a foundation of maybe. You deserve presence, realness, forward motion. And that starts with breaking the trance of emotional recycling. So how do we do that? How do we shift from obsession to liberation? It starts with awareness. Every time they enter your thoughts, I want you to pause. Don't run. Don't distract. Just pause and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Is it sadness, loneliness, regret? Is it desire? Is it fear? Is it the ache of not being chosen? Naming the emotion takes you out of the story and into the body. It allows you to stop spinning fantasies and start tending to yourself, because often the person in your mind is just a symbol of an unmet emotional need in this moment. Let's say you're thinking of them as you scroll through photos of a wedding and suddenly you feel hollow. You imagine them by your side, hand in yours, smiling, and your mind says, I miss them. But if you pause, you might realize, I miss companionship. I miss being seen. I miss being touched. That is not the same as missing them. That is your heart telling you, I still have love to give. And the beautiful thing is, you don't need the past to open to love again. You just need the willingness to release the idea that your best moments are already behind you. Now let's be tender here, because I know the question still lingers. Do they think about me too? The honest answer, possibly, probably, maybe often, maybe only when they're reminded by a song or a scent or a moment of regret. But here's the deeper truth, that doesn't change your healing. Whether they think of you or not, your path forward cannot depend on their silence or attention. They may carry your memory with them. They may feel your absence like a bruise. They may even love you from afar, in the way people do when they aren't brave enough to show up. But love that lives only in the mind is not love that can nourish you now. And if you're still holding out hope that their thoughts will translate into action, remember this: longing without responsibility is not love. It's just emotional leakage. Someone thinking of you doesn't mean they're coming back. It doesn't mean they deserve to. It doesn't mean they would even be good for you now. And you deserve more than to be someone's private daydream. You deserve to be chosen out loud. So when your thoughts drift back to them, and they will, I want you to greet the memory gently. Let it come. Let it pass. You don't have to fight it. You just have to stop assigning it meaning. A thought is just a thought, a wave in the mind, not a signal, not a sign, not a sentence. You are allowed to think of them without needing to call them. You are allowed to miss what was without trying to recreate it. And you are allowed to still carry pieces of them in your heart, even as you let them go. Some people change us. They awaken us. They leave fingerprints on the soul. That doesn't mean they're meant to stay. Your mind remembers not because you're broken, but because you're human, capable of devotion, capable of hope. And now you must be capable of release, not a forceful letting go, but a soft, steady turning away, choosing each day to come back to yourself, to your now. And slowly over time, the memory fades, not into nothing, but into a place that no longer stings, where the thought of them becomes neutral, maybe even kind. That's when you'll know you've reclaimed your mind. You've turned the volume down. You've come home to your present. And that is where peace begins. We tend to think that forgetting is a sign of healing, that if you can go one full day without thinking of them, you're finally over it. But that's not how real healing works. Real healing is not about forgetting. It's about remembering with less pain, less urgency, less collapse. Because here's the truth most people don't say out loud. Even when you've healed, you might still think of them from time to time. Not because you want them back, not because you're still attached, but because you once opened your heart to them. And that kind of openness doesn't erase, it transforms. So let me ask you a question that might feel uncomfortable. What if they are still thinking about you, but for the wrong reasons? We like to romanticize the idea that if someone is thinking of us, it must mean something sacred. But people think about us for all kinds of reasons: guilt, ego, curiosity, jealousy. Maybe they see you thriving and it stirs something unresolved in them. Maybe they feel lonely and your memory is familiar comfort. Maybe they scroll past your face and wonder what could have been. But wondering is not commitment. Thinking is not action. If someone's thoughts of you don't translate into change, you must not build your hopes on their imagination. You're not here to be someone's favorite memory. You're here to be someone's conscious choice. And that starts with choosing yourself. Because when you constantly think about someone, when they take up more mental space than you'd like, it's not just about them. It's about where your attention is living. You are mentally located in the past. And that's dangerous, because wherever your attention lives, your energy follows. Let me explain. Every time you replay the memories, every time you imagine conversations that haven't happened, every time you reread the old messages, you're feeding an emotional loop. And loops don't end until someone chooses to stop spinning. So how do we break that loop? How do we reclaim our attention, our energy, our mind? We begin by creating space for what is real, not imagined, not hypothetical, but real. Start by grounding yourself in the present moment. I know this sounds cliché, but it's foundational. When you catch yourself drifting into a fantasy about them, gently pull your attention back into your body, into the breath, into the sensations of the room you're sitting in, into the sound of your own aliveness. Say to yourself right now, in this moment, I am here, they are not, and that's okay. That simple practice of calling your awareness back to the present is powerful, because the mind cannot obsess over the past when it is fully anchored in the now. And then I want you to start filling your life with experiences that remind you of your wholeness, not distractions, not emotional numbing, but true nourishment. What have you stopped doing since they left? What part of yourself did you silence when they were in your life? Maybe you stopped going to dance class, or writing, or traveling, or laughing deeply. Maybe you stopped flirting with life because their absence made you afraid to feel again. But feeling is not your enemy, it's your portal. So start slow. Invite life back in, not because it'll erase them, but because it will remind you of you. The you who existed before they came, the you who will exist long after they've faded. This is the part that transforms the narrative. When you stop asking, are they thinking of me? And start asking, am I thinking of myself? Because here's the paradox: the more you focus on them, the further you drift from yourself. But the more you focus on you, your healing, your joy, your becoming, the less power they have over your mind. It's not about forcefully removing them. It's about filling your life so richly, so fully, that they naturally lose relevance. And you don't need to hate them to let them go. That's another myth. You can release with love. You can say, thank you for what we shared. Thank you for what you awakened in me. Thank you for the pain that became my teacher. But I no longer need to carry your name in every thought. I choose freedom. Let me tell you a little secret. Emotional freedom isn't forgetting the person. It's remembering them without shrinking. When you can think of them and still feel tall, still feel grounded, still feel full, that's when you've healed. And that kind of healing, it's magnetic. It changes the way you walk into rooms, the way you carry your voice, the way you meet new people, not from desperation, but from presence, not from lack, but from overflow. You start to realize that the connection you craved with them was always available inside you. And yes, another love will come, a better fit, a deeper resonance, but it will not arrive until you make space. And making space begins in the mind. So I want to ask you, what thought can you release today? Just one. Maybe it's the question, what if they're happier without me? Maybe it's the hope, what if they'll come back? Maybe it's the belief, I'll never feel that way again. Whatever it is, breathe it out. Give it to the wind. Say, this thought no longer serves the woman or man I am becoming, because you're not becoming a version of you that waits. You're becoming a version of you that walks, that breathes, that rises. And in that rising, you realize something holy, that the love you thought you lost wasn't entirely theirs. It was yours. It lived in you. And it will return in new forms, in new lovers, in new moments of wild, open-hearted presence. But only when your mind has made space. So if they're still on your mind, be kind to yourself. But also, be honest. Ask, is this thought serving me, or is it chaining me? And if it's chaining you, you have a choice. Unhook, unwind, unclench, and step forward. Because freedom isn't found in their thoughts of you. Freedom is found in your decision to think of yourself. There's a moment in every healing journey when you stop chasing the question and start living the answer. It doesn't happen with a loud epiphany. It's quiet, subtle. It arrives when you find yourself doing something ordinary, washing dishes, walking through a grocery aisle, hearing the same old song, and you notice that for once, they didn't come to mind. Or if they did, it didn't sting. That's when you know the emotional tide has shifted. The obsession has softened. The longing has matured into something else, something wiser. You're no longer asking, do they think about me? Not because you've given up, but because the question itself no longer serves who you're becoming. And who are you becoming? Someone grounded, someone self-assured, someone who understands that being thought of is not the highest form of love. Being chosen, being shown up for, being met, that's the love you deserve. Because you're not here to haunt someone's memory. You're not here to be a beautiful echo in their daydreams. You're here to be touched, held, understood. You're here for presence, for participation, for real love that doesn't just visit your mind. It builds a life with you. So what do you do with the thoughts that still arrive? You greet them like old friends. You say, I remember, and then I release. You don't argue. You don't overanalyze. You don't punish yourself for feeling. You just don't invite them to stay. Because healing doesn't mean never remembering. It means remembering without needing to relive. It means realizing that love is not always meant to be permanent. Some love is transitional. Some love is catalytic. Some love is simply a mirror, there to show you parts of yourself you had forgotten. And that's a gift, even if it came wrapped in heartbreak. So instead of asking whether they still think of you, ask, what did I learn about love from this? What did I learn about myself? What will I no longer tolerate? And what will I seek with open arms? Because your mind is sacred territory. You are the curator of your inner world. And just as you wouldn't allow someone to walk through your home with muddy shoes, you don't have to let their memory trample your peace. Create boundaries in your mind, gentle ones, thoughtful ones. If they show up while you're trying to rest, say, not now, I'm resting in my wholeness. If they appear while you're on a date with someone new, say, this moment deserves my presence. Please step aside. You don't owe your past a lifetime of your attention. You owe your present the fullness of your focus. And yes, there may be days when the thoughts return with more intensity. A birthday, a smell, a dream, a sudden change in weather. That's okay. You're not regressing, you're remembering. And remembrance is not the same as reattachment. Feel it, name it, let it pass, like clouds across a sky you now own. Because the most powerful thing you can do is reclaim your emotional agency. You are not a prisoner to the memories that once made you feel alive. You are not a servant to your longing. You are not waiting for psychic confirmation that they still care. You care, and that's enough. You care enough about your growth, your joy, your emotional freedom to say, I release this. Not because it wasn't real, but because it's no longer mine. And from that place, from that grounded, liberated place, something beautiful happens. You open, not to them, but to life again. To the possibility of love that is mutual. Love that doesn't require decoding. Love that doesn't live only in your thoughts. Love that speaks, that shows up, that stays. You stop chasing signs and start creating signals. You stop watching their silence and start listening to your soul. You stop waiting for the past to redeem itself and start writing a future that doesn't need revision. And maybe, one day they'll think of you, not with guilt, not with confusion, but with quiet reverence, because you taught them something too. You showed them how love could be deep, how connection could be real, how memory could linger. But you also showed them how to let go, how to walk away with grace, how to close a chapter without bitterness. You became the person who not only loved well, but also released well. And in doing so, you didn't just honor them, you honored yourself. So let this be the closing of the loop. Not because you don't think of them anymore, but because you don't need to. Because now you're thinking of yourself. You're holding space for your own joy. You're listening to your own heart. And finally, your mind is quiet. It's not waiting. It's not looping. It's not pleading for answers. It's resting in clarity. And in that stillness, there is peace. A peace that doesn't need to ask, are they thinking of me? Because you've already decided I'm thinking of me now. And that is where everything begins again. Thank you so much for joining me in this journey of reflection, healing, and emotional courage. If this resonated with you, let me know in the comments what part of this story is still unfolding for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need a little reminder you are not alone in your thoughts, your longing, or your healing. Until next time, stay tender, stay brave, and always come home to yourself.